Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Simon Mantell. Simon is a serial entrepreneur and is the owner of Mantellis Biscuits in the Western Cape. Mantellis have really grown from a small ice cream and pasta manufacturer to a global player in the food service industry. Simon is also a very outspoken contributor to the Daily Maverick. And today he's going to be sharing some of his experiences as a business owner during lockdown, as well as his insights into business generally in the post-pandemic South Africa. Welcome, Simon.
Hello, Simon. Thank you very much for the kind words. You've asked me to talk about the real impacts on business and surviving and thriving as a business owner in the post-COVID area. So I thought I would just maybe touch on a couple of thoughts on the real impact on business just in general. And I think for any, all of your attendees, we've all been cut off by a taxi at some stage in our driving lives. And one of the things that has always struck me is the pearls of wisdom on the back of those taxis. And probably the most relevant one is, when days are dark, friends are few. And I think now more than ever, the days are exceptionally dark. I think that the experts, and I think Nick touched on it very eloquently at the beginning, how the modeling, we've been told a whole lot of things, that we believe a whole lot of things in much the same way. I think economics, as he rightly said, is a humanity. And what we've been told in terms of contraction of the economy and effects are completely, have been completely underestimated. You know, the reports are that GDP will decrease by between 8 and 10%. My view on it is I think it's GDP this year, March 2020 to February 2021, will probably decrease by close to 30%. That's probably the real reality. I think that in terms of, we all know how businesses are going to go to the wall, large and small. They're heading for choppy waters, and many more are going to hit the rocks. I think that from the perspective of employees, it's not just blue-collar workers who are going to get retrenched, all the way up the ladder. And you know, I know that there's often an uneasy relationship between maybe people who are commission-driven versus corporate, but I think the corporate suits are also going to be badly affected. And I would say that across the board, maybe 25% of people are either going to be retrenched or they're going to take a 25% reduction in salary. That is unfortunately the truth. I think from a debt holiday perspective, the music is about to stop. You know, people who are in debt have had debt holidays for the last 3 or 4 months. And I would say that by Christmas, January next year, once they've gone through their retrenchment packages, if they're lucky to even got a retrenchment package at all, we'll see the real action. I think that so many business channels have been affected, some obviously more than others. One thinks of the airline, hotels, hospitality. I mean, those are pretty obvious ones. And certainly from my perspective, as a biscuit manufacturer, it's quite interesting that in March, when I was reading what was happening in China and around the world, I thought, well, as a food manufacturer, we'd be pretty well insulated. But the reality is that significant channels that we do business in, being airlines, hotels, hospitals, have literally come to a grinding halt. And I think that it's required a lot of thinking on our part on how to change direction, how to survive and possibly steady the ship. I think maybe what I'm going to touch on in survival and steadying the ship is very relevant to your brokers and to the brokerages that they run. So I think that let me get away from the doom and gloom, because whenever there's chaos, there's opportunity. And I'd rather look at what we did and how it links back to what your brokers can do in terms of turning things around. Okay, so the first thing in terms of sort of survival and steadying the small ship that I run was that when times are good, you know, the fat hides all the inefficiencies. And during lockdown, it gave us some breathing space to look at exactly what we do. And what we did was we analyzed every single job function, whether it be from an administration perspective, every single production worker. We had time, we had that breathing space, which you normally don't have when you're working flat out. You don't have the time to actually plan. And, you know, it's interesting, whenever you have a task to do, if you spend more time planning before you execute the task, you will generally be more efficient at it. So we literally analyzed every single movement that people made on a factory floor. We looked at the admin, we did all of that, and we looked at how we could rationalize and how we could automate even further. You know, over the years as a manufacturer, you want to try and automate wherever possible. And we looked at our mix of customers. What's quite interesting is often you have customers who they give you a lot of hassle for the return that you get, and in much the same, I'm sure, with your brokers. They have clients who are probably problematic, and maybe they can be let go. So, you know, productivity is quite an interesting element. And I'm going to give an example. In Scandinavia, the minimum wage is probably 10 times what the minimum wage is in South Africa per hour. But in Scandinavia, you have one person doing the job of 10 people here, just through better ways and better planning. So, you know, that is something that is vital to look at. But I wanted to now touch on the thriving on opportunities which lockdown has created, so that, you know, we had what I would call inward looking opportunities or inward facing opportunities, and then obviously outward facing opportunities. One of the things for us, this kind of break, or kind of working at 50 or 60% of capacity, has allowed us to do, is to spend more time on research and development, recipe development, packaging development, any element that is going to stand us in good stead in the months to come. And when I say months to come, probably between 12 to 18 months to come. We've done more automation, we've done more trials, we've re-engineered the way we do things to become more efficient. And it's amazing how much time can be saved and how much cost can be saved. So that was the one, certainly inward facing. And then the other thing is, by analyzing all the tasks in any business, whether it's large or small, there are freeloaders. And I remember when I was employed, I wasn't the best employee under the sun, and I should have probably been let go when I did my articles. And I think that the same applies, that we've been able to actually have the people now at the factory who really want to be here and who want to be part of it. On the opportunities, on the outward facing side, the rand has weakened. We've got some very nice export opportunities that are about to open up. Previously, we had never done any online work, not ourselves, but you know what happened with lockdown. The very big online retailers weren't allowed to sell non-essentials. So suddenly they changed their focus to essentials, being non-perishable food. And fortunately for us, biscuits it's a non-perishable, and it's quite a nice category. And I think that there's going to be significant opportunity down the line in online, which is something also we would never have looked at previously, dealing with large online retailers. And the nice thing about online retail is they get the product to market far more cheaply than your conventional supermarket. So we have the reach of the online market, but at a significant price differential to mainstream retailers. Then on the marketing, advertising, and many of the things that I think that I'm going to touch on now might be relevant to the brokers, is on marketing and advertising. It's vital that in tough times, one communicates with one's customers and one markets. And what has been interesting with the media is that suddenly the media's revenue sources have dried up as businesses go to the wall. And what I found is certainly some of the electronic media platforms that we deal with, specifically radio, they're a lot more open to advertising campaigns on risk. where one needs to buy, normally one would buy advertising, and now you can say, well, look, let's run a campaign, and based on the turnover we do as a result of that campaign, we'll cut you in as a partner, which then limits our risk, and it gives them an upside on the advertising space that they wouldn't have previously been able to sell. So I think that's something that's, I never hear brokers advertise, or very seldom, and I think it's a space where there's a very affordable opportunity to communicate their businesses. We have these direct stores, about 12 of them around the country, and what has now happened is in a lot of the strip malls, there's space that's now available, which wasn't available previously, and the landlords are obviously desperate for tenants. So I think that area for us is going to grow dramatically as well. We'll be able to negotiate better deals for the guys who run these Mantellis direct stores. So I think that one of the things that's going to happen as well is that the market is going to shrink. All markets are going to shrink. But then the key then is to be able to consolidate and to have a greater share of that market, because people will get shaken out. So those are the opportunities, the outward facing opportunities. And I thought that what might be useful is for me to as a client, wearing the hat of a client, to give you a few thoughts that I have, and for your brokers on the short-term sector. I believe that short-term insurance is a must-have. It's not a nice-to-have. And I think that as business contracts, one of the things that we will still have to focus on is the must-haves. And I think short-term insurance, perhaps, obviously, clients maybe will try and reduce their premium as much as possible, but they're still going to have. You have to have short-term insurance. It's not like savings, which you can maybe put off. So I think that's a wonderful advantage that the short-term market has. When I look at other things, we get back to this thing of productivity. We're not actually a productive country, and within brokerages and businesses, there's a lot of opportunity to take cost out. In many ways, we have these pockets of excellence, but generally we're a nation of mediocrity. Our leaders are mediocre, political leaders, and if we just do things, if business owners just do things better than the next, they've already got an advantage. And typically the best way is to provide good service and to take cost out of whatever they do. I think that I touched on the aspect of freeloaders, and even within brokerages, both large and small, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to let the freeloaders go. There isn't any other way. If businesses are to survive, you cannot have excess fat. I think that the rats and mice competitors are going to be shaken out of the market, and in good times, on a rising tide, all boats float, and many of those boats shouldn't be in the water in the first place. So from my perspective, I think that's actually a good thing, whether it's in our industry or whether it's your brokers, that things get reset. From an administration point of view, and this is as a client, I know that we don't give our broker much of a hard time. We have a very good claims record, and we do things properly. And I'm sure we're a fairly profitable client for his brokerage. And I think it may be the time has come now maybe for people to focus on good business, not as opposed to just all business. I think marketing is absolutely key. Without marketing, without creating awareness, it doesn't just happen. And one of the things that I think where there's been a change is I always learned that sales were generated through the soles of your feet. And, there's all the talk about, well, everything is online and that's going to be the focus. But for me, a relationship with a broker as a client is a personal thing. And the only way it's going to happen is if people come and see me face to face. They see my business, they see what we do, and they provide advice. And, I think that there are many ways of generating new business. I'm just thinking, I was chatting to a friend of mine last night, who's the MD of a big ad agency. And they now have all these designers who have these 50,000 Rand max where previously all the computers were at work and now they've been taken home, and no one's thought about, well, how they're insured between work where they should be and their home environment. And I think that there are going to be opportunities to generate new revenue streams. I thought that a couple of things that I wanted to conclude with, and much of it will echo what Nick said at the beginning. One cannot dispute that COVID, if you get it, is a serious illness. One cannot dispute that it's put pressure on the hospitals. But we were sold a story of Armageddon. First, it was going to be the Spanish flu. The numbers were outrageous. And when you look at it, and this is just not from an actuarial perspective, but just like a kind of a common sense business perspective, the numerator and the denominator are wrong. And one of the things that has put fear into people is this mortality rate. And I'm looking now, I've written it down as of today. There are about 633,000 deaths. This is what's reported, and about 15 million or just over 15 million cases, which gives a mortality rate of 4%. But the main issue is that the 633,000 deaths, maybe 400,000 of those would have died in any case, or they've died with COVID as opposed to because of COVID. But the denominator is the issue. It's not 15.5 million cases. It's probably 200 million cases. And just for your audience to understand this, is that about 750 million people a year get flu in the world. Those are World Health Organization statistics. We're told that COVID is more infectious than flu. So how is it possible that there are only 15.5 million cases? And when you then divide 600,000 deaths, assuming all of them have died from COVID, by 200 million, you get to 1/3%. And if you then look at how many of them have died with COVID as opposed to because of COVID, it's 0.00%. So we've been given this fear. And I think that what's going to happen, and things change very quickly, and what happened here was that the media had a story to sell. They egged the experts on, they drove them into a corner, and each little expert had their moment of fame where it was going to be this, as I say, this Armageddon. And conveniently, it's given the politicians a get out of jail card, because when it all comes to, when the Spanish flu doesn't materialize like it hasn't, what will then happen is the politicians are going to say, well, we were acting on the advice of the experts. And what will then happen is 6 months from now, the media are then going to turn on the experts and say, well, we were given bad advice. So in conclusion, though, negativity and perspective, negativity has never solved any problem or helped to overcome any problem. And I think it's vital that we look at what we face with all of us from a perspective. So perspective for me is people who lived in the major cities in Europe, like London, Hamburg, Munich during World War II, and who were being bombed every night. That puts things into terms of perspective. The person, the guy or woman who owns a spaza store in a township where they can't get insurance and they have faced the risk of being held up and having their spaza store torched. The single mother who lives in informal settlement who has 2 children or 3 children, she's living in close proximity to the next dwelling. A paraffin lamp or heater gets knocked over, and if she's lucky, she and her children survive, but all her possessions are destroyed. That's stress, and that puts things into perspective in terms of what we're facing. And on the optimistic side is, if I look at the Springbok rugby side of 2019, prior to Rassie Erasmus taking over, there were a bunch of no-hopers. We would have been lucky to have got to the quarterfinals. And by changing things and tweaking things ever so slightly, he didn't do anything major. He stuck to the basics. We came back as world champions. But most importantly, if I remember the vibe in the country for that period post-war, during the World Cup, leading up to the final and post that, our mood as a nation So things can also unite us far more easily, you know, than we think. And things can change, things can turn on a ticky. So my kind of take-home message is that incremental change, not dramatic change, is important. We need to continually, but that's the story of business, is that you're always making incremental changes. It's very seldom that's an 180-degree turn. So it's incremental changes that lead to improvement. I think as business people, you shouldn't be in business if you are unable to identify a market, if you can't create a need in that market or develop or foster that need and then satisfy that need. I think that short-term insurance certainly is one of those products that the market does need. Maybe it needs tweaking, but I think that there are enough opportunities in the market for efficient brokers to prosper, notwithstanding the tough times that we face. And my last point is, I think it requires a practical approach, requires a positive attitude. Negativity gets you nowhere. And then that very relevant Afrikaans word, vasbyt. I think vasbyt is what we need, and you know that's my finishing message to your audience.
Thank you, Simon. Great discussion, quite positive and plenty of food for thought, if you'll pardon the ridiculous dad joke.